Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama,
Madhava Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Yashodanandana Brajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Banachari Jamuna Tira Banachari Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopidana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yasodhanandana Brajajana Randana Yasodhanandana Brajajana Randana Yamuna Tiro Banachadri Yamuna Tiro Banachadri Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihari Jaya Uttara Mansa Paribhajagacharya Sakhareshwara Smadhati Tam Saraswati Goswami Bhagavad Jaya Nanda Kori Vaishnava Jaya Ramacharya Sri Haridas Thakur Jaya Prem Sutaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakti Jaya Sri Radha Krishna Bhog Gopinath Sam Kanda Radha Kanda Giri Jaya Vrindavan Dham Ki Jaya Navadvip Dham Ki Jaya Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Jamuna Mai Ki Jai, Guru Dwarka Dham Ki Jai, Swami Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, all glories to that. All glories to that. Thank you very much.
Where's Maharaj?
Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna. Devotees, we have to wait for Maharaj. He was here. I think he has some disconnection. We wait for Maharaj to come back. Then we can start. Okay.
Hare Rama. Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,
Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, can you hear me?
My humble obeisance, Maharaj. Yes, Maharaj. Thank you. Thank
Okay,
you
so
for
you
coming
can
back.
hear me.
I saw you before and you left.
Yeah, I had some problem with my software. It wasn't,
Sorry.
I
Sorry
couldn't
about
get my VMix software.
that. Okay.
Somehow Zoom expanded out to full-size screen. And then
Yeah.
after it expanded to full-size screen, I couldn't make it small again.
Okay,
And
sorry.
I couldn't get to my other software. Finally, I made it small, but then still my other software somehow or another wasn't revealing itself. So I had to shut everything down and
Yeah.
start it all up again.
Sorry about that. Prabhupada
Yeah,
have
well,
chanted Radha Madhava, so I will put this place on the screen so you can start, please.
okay. Let me
So
do
we go to the
my,
screen, then you can start. Thank you so
all right.
much.
Okay. If you don't mind, you can just let me have my own screen. I have my own
Okay. All right.
software that
The screen. Okay.
will do that. So here we go.
So you can have the screen. Okay.
Okay. Mukhatastalunir binnang jihatatro pajayate tato nana raso ye jivayayo digamyate mukhatastalunir binnang jihatatro pajayate tato nana raso ye jagye Jivayayo digamyate. And so this translates, from the mouth, the palate became manifest, and thereupon the tongue was also generated. After this, all the different tastes came into existence, so that the tongue can relish them. Okay, so can someone say something? I just want to see if I'm actually recording on my side.
You want to record also?
I am recording already, but I just want to see if it's working. But it's not, I'm not recording myself, obviously. So
Okay.
let me,
What do you want me to do?
you don't have to do anything. It's my problem. Okay, now I'm recording myself.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so this verse is in the second canto, and it is beginning of explaining about the cosmic manifestation. In the second canto, in the last chapter, which is chapter 10, we have an explanation of various kinds of subject matters that are contained in Srimad Bhagavatam. And that is, of course, Atra Sargo Visargas Cha Stanam Poshanam Utaya Manvantare Shanukata Nirodho Muktir Ashraya. So there are 10 divisions of statements in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So these are basically what the Srimad Bhagavatam is subject matter, what the subject matter is of Srimad Bhagavatam. Atra in this Srimad Bhagavatam, Sarga is the creation, Visarga, subsequent creation, Atra Sarga, Visargas, Cha. Stanam is the planetary systems, Poshanam is the Lord's protection of his devotees, Utaya, the creative impetus, then Nirodho, the Manvantaras are described, then Ishanukata, which is the science of understanding about God, and then Nirodho is the winding up of material nature, and finally Muktir, liberation, Ashraya is the summum bonum, or the Supreme Lord. So the first verse of this chapter was, as we said, Atra Sargo Visargascha Stanam Poshanam Utaya Manvantari Shanukata Nirodo Mukyar Ashraya. And it translates as, there are 10 divisions of statements regarding the following: creation, subcreation, planetary systems, protection by the Lord, creative impetus, a change of manu, science of God, returning home back to Godhead, liberation, and the summum bonum. So those are the 10 items that are discussed in Srimad Bhagavatam. And right now we are on Sarga, which is the creational aspect of the Supreme. Sarga means how the material universe is actually unfolded. We know that this material universe is kind of a virtual reality. It's designed by the Supreme Lord, by Krishna, and it's designed to, oh, just a second, I forgot. Am I able to record this?
Yes, you say you are recording by yourself in your end.
Yeah,
Yes, you are recording.
okay.
It's also on YouTube Live.
Okay,
Yes.
good. So now I'm recording. Okay, good. So I'm recording on 2 different softwares at the same time. So,
Okay.
but on the one software, I won't get any images back from Zoom. It's better recording, but it won't give me anything back from Zoom. That's why I have to have the Zoom part too. All right. So the creation is the material way that the material universe becomes manifest. We know that the spiritual world has eternal planets, and in the spiritual world, everybody is there forever. There is no leaving or no entering the spiritual world. It's an eternal existence there. So no one is born, no one dies. However, someone can leave it temporarily if they decide to want to enjoy on their own outside of serving Krishna. So the minute a person desires to be separate from Krishna or to compete with Krishna, then they immediately exit the spiritual world and they come to this material world. That's where they come. And this material world has to exist at that point. So for the material world to exist, we have Krishna, first of all, expanding into Balaram. So sometimes we say Krishna and Balaram. They can also be called Vasudev, and Sankarshan. And then from them comes Pradyumna and Aniruddha. And then we have a Narayan, and from a Narayan comes the second Chaturvyuha of Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. And then from there, from Sankarshan, we get the Mahavishnu. And from Mahavishnu, the material universe is generated. So Mahavishnu lies down in the causal ocean, and from the pores of his body and from his breathing come unlimited universes, like little globes. They come out of his breathing and out of his pores. Now, he enters into each one of those universes individually as Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, and he finds that inside the universe it's hollow, there's nothing in there. So he fills half the universe up with his perspiration, and when it's half filled with his perspiration, he lies down on Anantasesh, a different Anantasesh, one that's in the Garbha universe. And from his navel grows a lotus flower. Out of that lotus flower comes Brahma. And gradually, in each universe, various different manifestations become available. So, from another point of view, this same expansion is described in this way from another point of view. And that is that we have the Supreme Lord, Krishna, and one of his expansions is Sadashiva. And Sadashiva has a consort. Sadashiva's consort is called Rama Devi. So Rama Devi and Sadashiva from Sadashiva, who is actually the same as Vishnu. He's an expansion of Krishna. So from his vision comes Shambhu, who is actually Shiva. And this Shiva carries the living entities into the material world. As well, the glance of the Supreme causes the Brahmajyoti to transform into what we know of as the Pradhan, which is just material nature. And Pradhan has no distinctions. It's not the Brahmajyoti anymore. It's been touched by the material energy, but it is not differentiated. So it's completely homogeneous. Now, this Pradhan becomes agitated into the Mahatat. So the Mahatat is the same as the Pradhan, except for the Mahatat is beginning to transform into various kinds of transformations. And the first transformation that comes out of the Mahatat is Ahankara, or false ego. From false ego is generated mode of passion, mode of goodness, and mode of ignorance. Now, false ego comes together with the mode of ignorance to create 5 gross elements. Those are earth, water, fire, air, and ether. So those are generated, along with mind is generated from false ego and mode of ignorance. From the mode of passion, we get the senses, which are touch, taste, or rather the eye, the ear, the nose, the mouth, and the skin. We get the senses in the mode of passion coupled with the false ego. And we also get the, actually the 5 subtle sense objects. Those are with the mode of ignorance. So that's touch, taste, form, smell, and sound. So those are, I think, with the mode of passion. So, I mean, the mode of ignorance. So mode of ignorance and false ego makes the 5 gross elements and the 5 subtle elements, or touch, taste, form, smell, and sound. Now, from the mode of passion, we get the working senses, the knowledge acquiring and working senses. The knowledge acquiring senses are the eyes, the nose, the ears, the tongue, and the skin. The working senses are the arms, the legs, the tongue. Now it's speaking, not tasting, so it's a working sense. And we have the anus and the genitals. Those are the 5 working senses. So that's how it begins to unfold. Finally, we have the mode of goodness, which generates the 10 demigods in charge of the senses, or at least their positions. So those are generated along with the intelligence. So then now we have the basic elements of creation. So this is the what's called the Sarga. So in this chapter, we start off with just 16 of these, and I'll take us there here, so because in this chapter, we go back to, here they are. The elementary creation of 16 items of Nat, namely the 5 elements: fire, water, land, air, and sky, sound, form, taste, smell, touch, and the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, and mind are known as Sarga, whereas subsequent resultant interactions of the modes of material nature is called Visarga. So these are the beginning elements of the creation. and they happen before Lord Brahma. And these things are all happening as a result of Krishna and his Garbhodakshai Vishnu form, expanding these various elements. And as we said, from the glance of Sadashiva comes from the radiation of the Supreme Lord comes the Brahmajyoti. The Brahmajyoti transforms itself into the Pradhan transforms itself into the Mahatat. The Mahatat then transforms into false ego, and then the earth, and then the mode of passion, mode of goodness, and mode of ignorance. And then we have these other things that we just talked about being generated. So this is not the primal senses, nor is it the original form. The original forms are all in the spiritual world. The real senses are all in the spiritual world, and we never lose them. But the original senses are spiritual senses. So, like a diver into an undersea, abyss. So if a person wants to go very, very deep underwater, they have to have a special diving suit, and they have to have a long pipe with some air coming down so they can breathe, because you can't breathe underwater. At least humans can't. So in a similar way, we get equipped with our diving suit. We have our original spiritual form, which is made of Sat, Chit, and Ananda. It is intelligence, knowledge, and bliss. So our original form, we have a form, and that form has a relationship with Krishna. And when we get ejected into the material world, then we have to have some diving gear to come here. So we get a subtle body, which is called the Linga Sharira. Then we get the gross body, which is called the Stula Sharira. So before we can get either a subtle body or a gross body, the ingredients that make a gross body, the ingredients that make a subtle body, they have to be created. And so we just talked about them being created. They were created by the Supreme in the very beginning. So we have this cosmic manifestation. And today we heard about the creation of the palette, 2:10:18. And here are the 16 items that we just read about in this verse 2.10.3. They don't give us a complete listing of them. They just give us earth, water, fire, air, and ether, and they give us form, touch, taste, smell, and sound, and they give us the ears, nose, eyes, tongue, and skin. They don't give us the working senses for some reason, but usually those are part of the same thing. Plus, of course, we have the mind. That's supposed to be the mind in the lower right, but didn't turn out well. Anyways, we have these 16 items. So no bodies have been made yet. There are no actual demigods yet. There is only Brahma, and he hasn't begun to do his part of the whole creational process. He is just witnessing. So these are the ingredients. In other words, if we were going to make automobiles, we would first have to make an automobile factory. So we're at the stage where we're just making the factory. We haven't built any cars yet. We're just making the factory. So we've made a good portion of the factory. Then eventually we're going to have to start building the cars. That is Brahma's duty. He has to figure out how to do that. And so the planetary systems have now started to be put into place, and these ingredients have been made. So now we've learned that the tongue or the palate has been created. And that was the verse that we just read, that from the mouth, the palate became manifest, and thereupon the tongue was generated. After this, all the different tastes came into existence so that the tongue can relish them. So as this section goes on, we will hear more about this creation sequence. So we are right now in 18. So we just heard about the Bharat Purush generating hunger and thirst. We heard about and we're going to hear about speech and fire and so on and so forth. These will be the items that will be discussed in the next couple of days as we go through chapter 10 of second canto. So now that we've kind of just talked about the basics, about how the material world was basically created, I'll stop before I move into the rest of what I'm going to talk about and ask if there are any questions. Does anybody have any questions about what we spoke about so far? I kind of spoke about a lot of things. I assume some of you already have been familiarized with some of these, but if not, let me know and I can answer any questions.
I think you can just go on Maharaj at the end of it, then question can come.
Somebody's saying something, I guess.
I guess, Maharaj, I think you can just continue when you finish the class, then there can be questions.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, all right. So we'll go a little further here. We talked about creation, and we talked about what I want to stress is material creation. The spiritual world is not created. There are always people in the spiritual world. They exist forever. And they're always engaged in pastimes. They're always cooperating with Krishna. There's no strife in the spiritual world. This is a different place. And that's where the human body, the original form, was there, because our bodies are a replica of the original forms of Krishna and all of his expansions and devotees. So Darwinian evolution did not have to create the human body. It was already there. What the physical body that you and I have is a mock-up or a virtual version of the spiritual bodies that exist in the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, bodies don't have veins, they don't have pipes and internal parts. They are simply made of energy of Sat, Chit, and Ananda. And so that means they can do whatever they need to do. One can apparently eat, but one doesn't have to pass stool. One can become different in their size or shape if they need to be. And in the spiritual world, bodies don't get broken, or they don't need glasses. They don't have all these kind of problems. They don't grow old because they're not made of the piping and tubing and the material energies that the physical bodies that we possess now in the material world are made of. Those are different kinds of bodies. Those are material bodies. Spiritual world, they look exactly like the bodies that we have in this material world, but this material world, these bodies are made out of atoms, out of chemicals, and these bodies are fashioned by material energy, and they stay together as long as the soul is inside. Then when the soul leaves, the bodies crumble apart into tiny pieces. They are dissolved by various molds and bacteria, and eventually they return to the elements. So like an image on a television screen, you're looking at my image right now. That image is not being generated by a computer. It's being uh, scanned by a camera. So you wouldn't see this image if there wasn't an original thing that there was an image of, my body in this case. So you're seeing a two-dimensional version of my body. If you were in this room in Freeport, Long Island, you would be actually seeing my physical body. But instead, you're seeing an image, which is two-dimensional. So it looks like the physical body, but it's two-dimensional. And in a similar way, the physical body is a representation of the spiritual form. Although it may not look like the spiritual form, it is a diving suit. It's made out of various chemicals, and the subtle body is first layer wrapped around the soul, and then the second layer wrapped around the soul is the gross body, this thing. So the gross body exists for a certain amount of years, and then when the body becomes too old or it gets damaged too much, then the soul has to leave it behind. But the soul takes the subtle body with it. The subtle body has three ingredients. The subtle body is made of mind, intelligence, and false ego. So I usually like to say false mind, false intelligence, and false ego, because we also have a real mind and we have a real intelligence and a real ego. But we identify falsely with the false ego. We identify falsely with the false mind, and we identify with the false intelligence. And this is called the subtle body. And the subtle body is incarcerated in a gross body. So there's two diving suits. First is the diving suit of the subtle body, then there's a diving suit of the gross body. Now, in the gross body, we walk around in this gross body, this virtual machine, and we walk around in it for about 80 or 100 years or whatever it is, and then the body dies, and we are pushed on. The subtle body and the soul, they leave together, and then they get born in another body, and that we call reincarnation or samsara. So the progress then is that we move from one body to another, to another, to another, until finally we realize that nowhere in this material world are we going to be satisfied, nowhere are we going to be happy. What we need to do is to go back to the spiritual world and get rid of this diving suit, this false layer that we are right now identifying with. And to do that, we have to engage in devotional service. So we're engaging in the process of hearing and chanting and other things. And while we're hearing and chanting, we are focusing on Krishna, and Krishna is purifying us. And eventually, when the subtle body is completely dissolved, in other words, we no longer identify with the false mind, we no longer identify with the false ego, we no longer identify with false intelligence. Then when we leave this body, we don't come to another material body again. Rather, we go back to the spiritual world. And that is the basics of Krishna consciousness. So that's basic philosophy. So we learn about creation or cosmic manifestation, and we do so we understand that this world that we stay in, this material world, is not our original home. It's an artificial place, like a virtual reality. It looks real, it feels real, but everybody is walking around in a false expansion, in a material form. So we can continue to walk around in false expansions in a material form. We can do that from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. And most people never even think that there's another possibility. But if instead of doing that, we engage in devotional service, we begin to realize that we're in a virtual reality and we will never be really happy here. And whatever we find in this material world will ultimately be destroyed because time destroys all forms. It destroys our bodies, it destroys our neighborhoods, it destroys our friends, it destroys our country, it destroys our ethnic group, whatever we identify with. Everything will be destroyed in the course of time. So that's why we can never be satisfied here. But if we go back to the spiritual world, nothing gets destroyed there. It is the spiritual world. All right, so that's basically most of what I had to say today. I'll leave open for questions.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you so much for your class. I have one question based on the papers, on what you said. You mentioned that the spiritual world, the body is like energy. Can you hear me,
The
Maharaj?
body is what?
In the spiritual world, we don't have the material body. It's more or
That's
less like the energy. We don't have to eat. We don't have to do. So my question is, and you also mentioned that the material body is like a chemical. So my question is, how does the chemical body, how was it able to overpower the energy that is spiritual, that keeps the human being
How
from
is it
the world?
how is it able to overpower the spiritual energy? Is that your question?
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay. That's a good question. Actually, it cannot, but it's by the mercy of the false ego. It's interesting. In Srimad Bhagavatam, there are several explanations of creation. You'll see that right now in Canto 2. We're reading one version of the creation sequence. But in Canto 3, we'll read another couple of 3 versions of the creation sequence. And what we discover is one of the most important ingredients to the material world is illusion. So before Brahma can create various kinds of bodily forms, before he can start pumping out cars, he has to create illusion. Why would he have to create illusion? Well, if we immediately understood what the nature of this place is, that nothing here is permanent, we will never be happy here, and that whatever we have here will eventually be taken away because it's temporary, we wouldn't stay here. We would say, what's the use of this place? I'll go back to the spiritual world. But for us to stay here, we have to not understand that. So the illusory potency is actually headed up by what we call ahankara, or false ego. So we identify with the material body. And because we identify with the material body, we identify with something that we are not. And therefore, this illusion overcomes us. We're actually more powerful than the illusion, but it overcomes us because we want material happiness. What keeps us here is material happiness. So there's a story that they give that in India, when they want to capture a monkey, they take a coconut and they hollow out the coconut so that there's just one hole in the coconut. And in that hole in the coconut, they put a big rock candy sugar lump. So it's a hard lump of sugar. You can't break it because it's just crystal sugar. and they tie one end of the coconut to a tree, and they put the sugar in the coconut, and they make a hole so that the monkey can get the sugar. So the monkey comes and he smells and he sees the sugar inside the coconut, and he immediately wants to get that sugar. He puts his hand through the hole in the coconut, but when his hand is holding the big lump of sugar, it's too big for him to pull his hand out of the coconut. So he puts his hand in to get that sugar. But now when he tries to pull his hand and the sugar out, the sugar's too big. So he's yanking on that sugar, trying to get it out of the coconut. And then he sees somebody coming to get him, but he wants the sugar so much that he can't let go of the sugar and run away. Instead, he keeps trying to pull the coconut, but the coconut's tied to the tree, so the coconut's not going anywhere. And the coconut has a hole too small for him to pull his hand out, as long as he's holding the sugar. Of course, if he let go of the sugar, he could pull his hand out, but he doesn't want to do that because then he'd have to give up the sugar. But the sugar is made out of rock candy, so he can't crush it. So there he is. He's stuck and he won't let go, so they come and they capture the monkey. That's all they have to do. If the monkey could give up the desire for the sugar, he could easily escape, but he won't do that. So that's the story that's told about that. So that's why we're in this material world. We want the sugar of material gratification. So when we come here to the material world, we get layered over by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different kinds of illusion. And now we're covered by 5 different kinds of illusion. And we become attracted by material allurements. We think, oh, we can have some nice sex life, or we can have some nice money, or we can have some nice, house, some nice cars, some nice land we can live in. We can have, boats or whatever it is that we fancy. So we're attracted to the sugar of the material world. We won't let go. But actually, the only thing that's trapping us here is our material desire. And if we give up material desire, then we see that there's nothing in this material world that's worth staying here for. But that's the trick. The problem is we're like the monkey. We still want the sugar candy. We still want that. And we want somehow to have the spiritual world both, but we can't do both. We have to do one or the other. The good news is that if we continue to engage in devotional service, we hear and chant, we rise for Mongol Artik, we read, we go to classes, we engage in Sankirtan, we cook Mahaprasad, we give service to other devotees, etc. As long as we're doing these things, we are bathing our mind in thoughts and actions for Krishna. And because we are, gradually our material desires are shrinking. We're still interested in that sugar candy, but the sugar candy is getting smaller. And eventually we'll realize we don't really even want the sugar candy anymore, and we'll let go and get out of the material world. But it takes some time for that. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yes, Maharaj. In continuation, can it be said that Krishna does not want everybody to come back to the spiritual world? That was the reason why he created the illusion.
Say that again.
Can it be concluded that Krishna really does not want the living entities, everyone, to come back to the spiritual world? Could that be the reason why he created the illusion in the first place? Because he created the illusion that kills the human spirit in the material world.
Yeah. So oftentimes
there is a church that is called the Jehovah Witness. Don't know if you know about them. Jehovah Witness Watchtower. They say that the number of people going back to heaven, to the kingdom of God, is 108 only, according to their own philosophy. Yes. So I'm asking because this illusion is the reason why we are here, Ahankara. Can it be said that Krishna does not want us to really come back? That was why he created the Ahankara and the illusion, everything, to keep us here. So how come are we to blame for not going back to the spiritual world?
Yeah, actually, there are people who do make that argument that the Supreme Lord is to blame for us being here, because if he made it easy, we could get out of here. But the blame comes back on us because we're the ones who want to be here. If we didn't want to be here, the Supreme Lord is happy to take us out of here. All we have to do is just keep thinking about him. It's not difficult. It's not expensive. It's easy to do. The problem is we don't want to do it because we still think that there's something worth having here. Now, eventually, everybody figures the puzzle out. Sooner or later, everybody figures it's not 108 people or 108,000. I know there's various religions who have this idea that there's an elect or a certain quantity of people who are going back to the spiritual world or back to heaven, but everybody else is doomed to stay here or to go to hell. But that's not true. The Supreme Lord is more merciful than that. However, he doesn't want you to go back to the spiritual world unless you want to serve him. So if you don't want to serve him, you don't want to be in the spiritual world, because there's nothing going on in the spiritual world except for service to Krishna. So deep in our heart, we have this desire not to serve Krishna. Instead, we want to do what we want to do in the material world. So as long as that desire to do what we want to do in the material world is strong, we don't want to go to the spiritual world. We wouldn't be happy there. And Krishna doesn't want to force us there. So we can stay here, where we can pretend to try various strategies to enjoy in this material world. Of course, they never work, but you can keep trying over and over again. And then you get ignorance, so that when you try 100 different ways in one lifetime to enjoy the material world, and all of them fail, then you can die and forget all about it and try 100 new ways to enjoy the material world in a new body. And then when that doesn't work, you can die and it all gets erased, and you can try 100 new ways in another body. And you can keep on doing like that. So it's not Krishna's fault, it's our fault. If we wanted sincerely to go back, then we have to do the work involved, which means to purify our minds. So that difficulty we experience to focus on Krishna, that is the price we have to pay to go back to the spiritual world. If we don't want to do that, then that means that we're still strongly hypnotized by the material world. We still think there's something worth enjoying here, and we don't really want to go back. So that's the situation. It's Krishna is only reciprocating with what we want. If we wanted sincerely to go back, then Krishna would immediately make arrangements that we could go back. He would give us devotional service. We would take to it very seriously. And in a very short time, we would be back in the spiritual world. Anybody can do it. You can do it. I can do it. Anybody in the street can do it. There's no one that can't do it. But the question is, will we do it? Some people don't know about it, so they're in ignorance. But some people do know about spiritual life, but still they're not interested in doing it. So if you don't want to help yourself, then Krishna is not going to force you to the spiritual world. There's another story given sometimes that a man is walking in India, and in India, you know, villages shift around sometimes. Sometimes the one part of the village becomes either poisonous, or there's no good water there, so everybody leaves. So when people leave one part of the village, you could have had a well. Somebody could have had a well where they drew water. And then people stop going to that part of the village because nobody lives there anymore. And when they stop going there, the grass grows and it grows around that hole where the well was. Now, somebody who's walking through that area might not have ever lived there before, so they don't know there's a well there, and grass has covered it over. And so they're walking along merrily, and suddenly they fall into the well. So you're walking along and you fall into a well. The well is maybe 20 feet deep. So maybe you broke your foot when you fell down in the well. Now, how are you going to get out of there? Nobody knows the well is there. You're in a place where nobody goes. And you're in a place where you're injured, so you can't even get out. So you can call, but will anybody hear you? Now, say, for instance, you're in this situation where you're in the well and you want to get out and you might die there because nobody knows you're there and nobody knows the well is there either. But somebody comes along and says, "Oh, what happened? You're down in the well," and you say, "Yeah, save me. I'm down in this well. I need to get lifted out somehow or other." And so somebody says, "Well, I'll throw you a rope." And then you try to climb up the rope, but you don't have any energy because you've already been down there maybe for a day or two. You haven't eaten anything and you're injured. So you're stuck down in the well and you don't have the strength to pull yourself up on the rope. So you say, "Well, can you please pull me up?" So then the person who's outside the well, they go get some friends and two or three of them say, "Okay, just hold on to the rope and we'll pull you out." So, they start pulling the rope and they notice that there's no tension on the rope. The rope is just pulling very easily. And they say, "Oh, why aren't you holding on to the rope?" And then the person at the bottom of the well says, "Oh, can you come down here and put my fingers around the rope so that I'll be pulled out?" So that's how people are, that if you don't even want to hold on to the rope, then why is Krishna supposed to help you? You're not even making any effort. So we have to make an effort to get out of the material world. We didn't have to come here, but we chose to come here. Now that we're here, most people don't even want to leave. They're happy being here, even if it's lifetime after lifetime with all kinds of nasty things happening. But those few people who do learn about it, now they have to do some effort to pull themselves out. And so if you're willing to do some sadhana, then you can be pulled out. The devotees are pulling you out. The spiritual master is pulling you out. The past acharyas, they're pulling you out. But you have to at least hold on to the rope. So maybe you're injured, maybe you fell down, maybe you've got no other hope. But if you won't even hold on to the rope, then the Supreme Lord and is not going to force you to come out of the material world. So anyway, that's a couple of thoughts that I had for people who are thinking that the Supreme Lord's to blame for our being stuck in the material world.
Thank you, Maharaj. Madhuvan Prabhu, please unmute. Madhuvan. Madhuvan, are you there? He raised his hand up. I'm seeing him.
Okay.
But he's not unmuting himself. It's okay. We'll wait for him to come. Maharaj, I have another question. In the purport, Prabhupada talk about Varuna.
Uh-huh.
Varuna being, he said, Varuna is the controlling deity for all releasable juices.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk a bit about this Varuna? Where is his planets? Where does he stay?
Mm-hmm.
Like we talk about,
Okay,
you know about
so
Indra and all the rest. in the papers.
Right, right. So it says the gradual process of evolution suggests the explanation of the controlling deities, Adi Daiva. So, oh, I realized I never read the purport. I thought I had, but I guess I didn't. I'll read it then now. The gradual process of evolution suggests the explanation of the controlling deities, Adi Daiva, because Varuna is a controlling deity of all relishable juices. Therefore, the mouth becomes the resting place for the tongue, which tastes all different juices, of which the controlling deity is Varuna. This suggests, therefore, that Varuna was also generated along with the development of the tongue. The tongue and the palate, being instrumental, are adibhotam forms of matter, but the functioning deity, who is a living entity, is adidaiva, whereas the person undergoing the function is adhyatma. Thus, the three categories are explained as to their birth after the opening of the mouth of the Virat Purush. The four principles mentioned in this verse serve to explain the three main principles, namely Adhyatma, Adidaiva, and Adibhutam, as explained before. So this purport actually has a lot of mysterious stuff in it. I forgot that I hadn't read the purport when I started this out, because there's a number of different interesting things here. One of them is, as you mentioned, you asked the question about Varuna. So Varuna is the demigod in charge of the waters. So there is a demigod in charge of the water. He's also in charge of the demons to an extent too. He has some controlling effect over the demons because the demons always go to him. The demigod Varuna is in charge of moisture and water. And without water, we can't taste things. So for the tongue to work, there has to be water. Water dissolves various liquids and dissolves various foodstuffs. And when it dissolves various foods, then we're able to taste it. Otherwise, we couldn't taste it. So we're hearing about this structure. Again, we haven't built any cars yet, but we have, and we are building the assembly line that will create the cars. For the human bodies to be assembled, or for that matter, any bodies, whether they're human or animal or plants, for those bodies to be assembled, there have to be senses of some kind. Human body has a certain kind of senses. Animal bodies have other kinds of senses. And even plants and other creatures, they have some kind of senses. So for reality to work, this material, artificial reality that we call the material world, for it to work, there have to be interactions of different things. What things are being interacted? Well, we have the individual, the soul, who's experiencing things up the pipeline from his gross senses to his subtle senses. So the individual, he's experiencing things. What is he experiencing through? He's experiencing them through the senses, the knowledge acquiring senses. So we've got 10 senses. Some acquire knowledge, those are called the Jnanendriya. Other senses, they're working senses called the Karmendriya. So the hands and legs, they're working. They do things in the external world. Whereas the eyes and the ears, they're not doing anything in the material world. They're simply taking input. Without our eyes, we couldn't see how to walk. We would have difficulty walking. So our eyes are inputting senses. Now, for the senses to work, not only do we have the body, and the senses are a part of the body, And there's the soul who's experiencing what the senses are seeing. But there's also the demigod who's in charge of that senses, like I think the Ashvini Kumar demigods are in charge of the nostrils, and I forget who's in charge of the eyes and the ears. So we have different demigods who are controllers. So you and I are tiny living entities. We are tiny particles of Krishna. And the demigods are also tiny living entities. They're particles of Krishna. However, the demigods have controlling potency over material nature. In a city, when you go to the city hall, you have the parks department, you have the sewage department, you have the electrical department, you have the waterworks, you have all these different things. So if you're sitting in your home, you're not sitting in downtown at the city hall, you're sitting at home, but water is being delivered to you, but electricity is being delivered to you. Sewage is being delivered away from you, and gas, you may have some kind of piping for natural gas in your building as well. So there are people who are controlling how much gas comes to you, how much electricity comes to you, when the sewage gets, how much sewage is being disposed of and where it's being disposed of, etc. So the demigods are those people who are controllers. And at this stage, we have to make these all at the same time. We have to make the senses, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the mouth. We have to make the demigod in charge of the eyes, the ears, the nose, and the mouth. We have to make the body, and we have to make the things the body is made from available at the same time: earth, water, fire, air, and ether, because the senses are made out of earth, water, fire, air, and ether. So all these things are being created at the same time, and this is what they mean by this Adi Devam, Adi Bhotam, and Adi Atma. So that's a understanding. Plus, water is connected with the sense of taste. So without water, there would be no taste. And then Varuna is connected with the water. So that's how that all fits in. That's the way that the Supreme Lord created the whole system of how the material universe works. So I don't know what more I can say about it than that. Maybe you have some further questions about it.
Thank you, Maharaj. Gura Prabhu, please unmute. Prabhu Viraha, if you are free.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All
Hare
glory to
Krishna.
Srila Prabhupada. All glory to the Asana devotees. Thank you very much for being here and for the wonderful discussion. The question I want to ask might sound like being polemic, but since the Bhagavatam verse offers us opportunity to always clarify, so I'm seizing the opportunity once again. In your description of the spiritual world, if I heard you clearly, you were saying there's no entry, there's no exit, eternally present and the same. And we also learned that time has no influence in the spiritual world. So there's no past, there's no present, there's no future, and if there's no past, then it means that there's no such history of living entities living the spiritual world, because that would mean the past. So how to I'm still trying to see how to reconcile the fact that there's no time influence, so there's no history and past for the living entities in the spiritual world, and for the fact that Krishna seems to have explained already that the two worlds, material and spiritual, exist simultaneously. And in that sense, I think all its energies exist simultaneously. Material, internal energy, external energy. I think they all exist simultaneously. And
They
if
all
that is
exist what? I'm trying
simultaneously, simultaneously.
simultaneously.
Simultaneously, yeah.
So if they exist simultaneously, uh, of course, the inferior can be given the opportunity of coming to the superior state, but eternally they seem to exist simultaneously. And Krishna said, the conditioned living entities are always in the material world, and the spiritual deliberated entities are in the spiritual world. So, from Krishna speaking, we can conclude that it is his plan, or it was destined, that some souls are going to be are liberated eternally, and some are not. So, but they're trying to give the explanation that it is otherwise, that we were there before, and now, even though there's no influence of time, there's no history, but we still have to believe also that we were there before and we left. Whereas Krishna says that the two exist simultaneously. He said two types of living entities exist: the liberated and the conditioned. So, Maharaj, please, it's from your statement that I try to again uh, get some clarification. If the spiritual world is a place where there's no entry, no exit, because it's an eternal place. So why do we try to force the idea that we were there before and now we can go back? So please, can you explain? I'm driving, so please excuse the sound at the background.
Yeah, it's difficult to hear, but I think I cut the gist of your questions. You've asked about 15 questions, and I'm not going to be able to get to all of them, but I'll try to talk a little bit about this, because I think in general devotees get very confused over these, and the reason they get confused is they bring material conceptions to spiritual reality. It's like the five blind men and the elephant, five blind men, they go to the elephant, and each one says what they understood the elephant to be. One pulls the leg of the elephant, thinks, oh, elephant's like a big tree. Another one pulls the trunk and they says, oh, the elephant is like a snake. Another one pulls the ear and they think elephant is like a big flat leaf, So which one of them is right? The fact is, they're all right, but at the same time, they're also all wrong, because they don't see the whole elephant. They just see some part of the elephant. So oftentimes, this is what happens when we're talking about the spiritual world. Prabhupada said that the spiritual world is where no one ever leaves, or no one ever comes. No one is born there. People are there forever. So in one way of speaking, that's true. In another way of speaking, that's not true. It's not that I'm being, duplicitous or contradictory. It's just the way that the material and spiritual world work. It's simultaneously one and different. So the living entity, if we were saying that you were in a bed and you were asleep, and in the bed you were having a dream, and you dreamed you were in Africa, and you dreamed some tiger was running after you, about to bite you, and you were in terror, we could ask the question, where are you? Now, in your dream, you're in Africa being chased by a tiger. In reality, you're in your own room. There's no tiger. You're not in Africa, or maybe you're in Africa also, but, the question then becomes, what do you mean by the question? So if we mean, where are you really? You are not being chased by a tiger. You are in your bed. But where are you in your mind? You are being chased by a tiger. So in a similar way, we are and we are not in the spiritual world. Krishna himself says, Daivihi Esha Gunamayi Bhama Maya Dharatya. He calls the material energy divine. So is it divine energy or it's material energy? Which is it? The answer is it's both. Depends on how you see it. So the living entity is in the spiritual world always, but because of his forgetfulness of Krishna, from his turning his face away from Krishna, it says, Krishna bahir mokha hanya bhogavanchakari nikatastamayatari japati adari. The living entity turns his face away from Krishna. That's in the Prema Vivarta, or I don't know, one of those, either that or some other literature. It's quoted in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So he's turning his face away from Krishna in a dream. So in that dream, we're in the material world. We're experiencing the pains and sufferings of the material world, but actually we're in the spiritual world, like the sleeping man. So you can ask the question, has he left the spiritual world? The answer is no. Has he left the spiritual world? The answer is also yes, depending on exactly what you mean. If you mean, is he experiencing the material world? The answer is certainly yes. If we mean from an ontological point of view, the answer is no. So in that sense, we recognize that the living entity has indeed made a error in his thinking, and as a result, he apparently imagines himself to be in the material world, which is where Maya exists. And that's why we're reading about it. It's not that the Bhagavatam is lying to you when it says there's a material world. We're not talking about the creation of the material world and no one's there because it was not really created. It is created in a very real sense, but it's also created out of spiritual energy. But that spiritual energy is created in a way to be material energy for those people in the wrong consciousness. So the minute you see the entirety of creation as Krishna's energy to be used for Krishna, immediately even the material world disappears. You are in the spiritual world even now. But if you see it from a material point of view, then you're in the material world. And like the person dreaming, you appear to be somewhere where you are not. And that's what the material world is all about. It's things appearing some way that they're not. The material world is called Maya, that which is not. So we just have to be careful about the way we talk about things so we don't bewilder ourselves. Now, as far as the spiritual world goes, there is no effect of destructive time. If there was no time, people would be frozen like in some kind of ice block or something like that. There is passage. There's sometimes day pastimes, there's sometimes night pastimes. We know that Krishna has Ashta Sattvika Vibhava. He has, he has actually eightfold pastimes. That's what I'm trying to describe here. He has different pastimes he engages throughout the day. And it happens on a cyclical basis. He has a pastime he has in the morning, a pastime he has in the middle of the afternoon, et cetera, et cetera. He has pastimes he has late at night. So there's a passage of time in the spiritual world, but it's not destructive time. In the material world, we have destructive time where we meet somebody and then they leave their body. So there was a time when we had a relationship, we had good talks, we had exchanges of loving, devotional love in various ways. And then the person left their body. So we can no longer do that. That's destructive time. That does not exist in the spiritual world. So there's a type of time that exists in the spiritual world and a type of time that does not exist in the material world, in the spiritual world. So time is not exactly the same thing. If you think of it very simplistically, then certainly you'll be confused because it's more complicated than that. And If you want to know all those details, then you have to go reading through all kinds of very esoteric literature. But in basics, we understand that people have relationships. In the spiritual world, they're called leelas, or we call them pastimes. Prabhupada used to refer to them as pastimes. So for a pastime to exist, time has to pass, you know. So in one sense, time is happening in the spiritual world. But in another sense, there's a kind of destructive element of time that does not happen in the spiritual world. So if a person makes the wrong conception and wants to compete with Krishna, turns his face away from Krishna, then for a split second in spiritual time, he's in the material world for millions of lifetimes. And then he suddenly, it's like if you were, making some kind of prasadam. You were cooking it, and for a minute you fell a little bit asleep or something, and woke up. Oh, I better be careful. I could burn myself. So it's like that. You're in the spiritual world. You have a relationship with Krishna. For a split second in spiritual time, you were somewhere else. You were in the material world. But in the material world, you're here for millions of lifetimes. It's a whole different time scheme. It's not the same kind of time. And so, in one sense, we can say you never left the spiritual world. In another sense, you were here for millions of births. So, just try to understand that those two things have to be fully appreciated, that there's nuances to it, that if you just run in and you assume that everything is the same simple way that you think it is, then you'll run into contradictions. But if you understand it a little more deeply, you'll see that those not contradictions, but the situation of the relationship between the spiritual world and the material world is quite complex. So I think at this point, I'm struggling, I had some medical episodes the last few weeks. I'm getting something called fibromyalgia, where I'm getting muscle pains, and also fatigue. And so sometimes the way that the schedules work out, I have things back to back, and it just kind of pushes me to the edge of what my ability to stay awake and ability to function is. So I'm going to basically, kind of cap it off here. If what was his name, Madhu, has
Thank you, Maharaj. Yeah,
another question,
Madhu.
he can,
Madhu has
ask
left again.
Madhavan.
Are you
But
still there?
otherwise, I'm going
I'm there now. I'm
to
there.
end today's session. Let me
I,
turn up the sound, because I'm hearing somebody talk, but I'm not hearing what they
I just
say.
like to appreciate Maharaj for the explanation about the time differences. I'm very happy to hear that, and it gives some enlightenment. Thank you very much. That is an added understanding, the way to understand time in the spiritual world and the natural world. Thank you very much for that. Hare Krishna.
Okay.
Hare
So-
Krishna Maharaj. Thank you. Thank you very much for we taking so much of your time and the trouble you take just to help us. I quite appreciate the lecture, the way you simplify the situation. In a nutshell, because when you analyze this whole scenario or situation, to me, just like we need to do mentality change. How do we change the mentality from material mentality to spiritual mentality? Because initially, when you explain, how the first thing Lord Brahma created Maya, to me, I just saw the scenario like maybe you want to bring somebody from America, then you take him to a village, a remote village, for one reason or the other, maybe in Africa.
So before the child could survive in that place, we will have to forget his life in America. Then you have to be under education. Otherwise, I think the boy can just commit suicide because when he starts thinking of the life he was living, then from where he is presently. So that's the way I see the situation when we're in the material world because it's highly frustrating. But the illusion makes us think that things can get better, or after all we're enjoying. So I think that illusion just to help us, you know. Otherwise, nobody will be able to stay in the material world if they can remember their life in the spiritual world.
Yeah,
So
we have to be ignorant to stay in this material world. And if we want to enjoy material happiness, we have to at the same time drink deep of the cup of ignorance. Otherwise, we see that it's not really happiness, and we think, "Why am I here? Let's go back to the spiritual world." Immediately, you bounce right back. If everybody did that, there would be no material world. There was no material world, and we say, "Yay, no material world." But the problem is there wouldn't be any love either. So, for people to have love, there has to be the possibility to not love. So love is voluntary. So if it's voluntary, that means you can give it or not give it. And if you don't want to give love to Krishna, that's fine. Krishna allows that. But you have to have some place where you can do it. You can't do it in the spiritual world because everybody there is a lover of Krishna. So you get another place where you can do that. But to do that, you have to drink deep of the cup of ignorance. And then you have to ignore the fact that you're suffering. You have to ignore the fact that everything's temporary. You have to ignore the fact you get a few little raisins of happiness and big, chunks of poop and unwanted stuff that happens to you all the time. You have to ignore all that stuff and think that somewhere in the future, somewhere there, I will enjoy. And so that's how ignorance keeps you going in the material world. And eventually, everybody figures it out. And we have a process, it's called Bhakti Yoga. And Narada Muni wrote the Narada Pancharatra, which gives specific details how in the age of Kali Yuga, one rises early, attends Mangalarati, one reads Srimad Bhagavatam, one engages in Sankirtan Yajna, one serves the devotees, one tries to eat prasadam, one cooks prasadam for others, one makes donations, etc., etc. And these are the tools that we do kind of externally. We don't have deep internal feeling, but we do them externally. And when we do them externally, we eventually come to the point where we become enough purified that we feel them internally, and we become disconnected from the material world. We see it for its virtual reality. We're no longer hoodwinked by it. We're no longer tricked by it. So we see it, and we're not taken in anymore. But it just means we have to perform our sadhana for a longer amount of time. And if we want to make extra points, we need to chant Hare Krishna very, very carefully. If we do that, then very quickly we'll get to the stage where we won't take the material world seriously. Otherwise, even as devotees, we'll take the material world seriously.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you so much for your class.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
We'll let you to rest.
Thank you.
Please, we
Okay.
ask all devotees to kindly unmute yourselves and let's chant Hare Krishna to Mahamantra to Maharaj for coming to bless us. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,
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 Hare
Hare
Hare,
Rama, Rama Rama,
Hare.
Jai
His Holiness Chandrasekhara Maharaj ki jai.
Hare Krishna. Thank you all very much.
so much, Maharaj. Thank you.
Hari Hari Bo, all glories to West Africa Yatra. Hare Krishna.
Hare.
Hare Krishna.
Let me see.